hello, and Merry Christmas. It's almost Christmas, but this is not Santa's sleigh. This is something a little bit different than what you guys have seen in our videos, have seen in our shop. It's red, it's got an H badge, it says VTEC Turbo. It's instantly recognizable. This is the Civic Type R. The Civic Type R on our dyno. What the heck are we doing? Well, we have some news for you guys, and that is that we are, and we have been hard at work at developing for this platform. Now you might ask why, and the answer to that is why not? Amazing car, manual shifter, great engine, super fast on track. I've competed against these cars. I've always liked how they look. I know it's a little bit polarizing, but the newest one takes that down a notch. But anyways, really a great car all around. And DI, direct injected, turbocharged, right up our alley. And now our friends at COBB have support for it. And Hondata's had support for it for a long time. I'm all about making you guys enjoy your cars more in any way that we can. And having this tuning tool here in my hand, the COBB Accessport, has opened that door up for us to really add a lot of value to your tuning experience of your Honda products. This is an established quantity. We know that it's been around for many years, and you know that there's a lot of support in the Honda community. So we're going to be doing a little bit of both. The engine's going to always, of course, going to be the same, but we're going to be calibrating this car. We're going to be going through a development cycle with this car. You're going to see quite a bit of it. You're going to see how to use these devices. You're going to see how the Accessport and the handheld device makes your life sweet. And you're also going to see what kind of power they make, what kind of power makes stock, what kind of power makes tuned, different fuels, the whole gamut of experience. We're all about to embark on this exciting journey. I hope you guys are just as excited as I am. And without further ado, let's get this thing installed on the car. Let's get us data logging, and let's see what it can do stock on our dyno. It's nice to be in here. It's a nice seat, nice shifter. All right, to unbox your Accessport, it's quite simple. You get a couple of information cards. Inside here, you're gonna have your pouch, which contains your Accessport. There's a little film on the screen that you can remove after your installation. It says maps are preloaded. COBB OTS maps are preloaded. We would send you our own custom calibrations if you get the Accessport through us. Then you've got a little holder that mounts, and USB cable to connect to your computer to download files and to upload data logs. Now in this box, what you have is the OBD cable, as well as a little sticky mount that you can mount somewhere on your dash. On top of that, some cars will require a jailbreak, and COBB includes this, so there's no additional devices that are needed to jailbreak the car. This is on just the newer Civics. We're going to plug this into the OBD port and follow the on-screen instructions for the Accessport. Another important thing that you want to do is you want to make sure you got a battery charger on this, especially for the first time that you install the Accessport, because it can take a little bit of time. The OBD port on these cars is also very, very accessible. It's right underneath here on the left side. Once you've flashed your tune onto the car, you actually don't need to keep the Accessport plugged in. You can for data login to see information on the screen, which is nice, and I usually kind of tuck my wire, and wherever I mount the Accessport, I make sure I just have just a little pigtail there, so it's nicely mounted, but it's not necessary for you to keep that plugged in. And the first thing you're going to see that the Accessport is not installed, not married to any vehicle, so you just key on and you follow the instructions. So you go okay, And then you're given two choices here. Troubleshooting just reads codes. Any codes on this vehicle, no codes are found. And then, of course, to install. So this is what you want to do. So confirm that your vehicle matches the identification. So go ahead. You're gonna have a set of these preloaded maps. Your stage 0 map is going to be your stock calibration, so all the tables are stock, and we're gonna start with that. The advantage of flashing a stage 0 map and having this installed is that you can data log, and that's what we wanna do on the dyno, see how the car is performing stock, grab all the data, and then build our own calibrations. You're also gonna see these stage 1 tunes here that are developed by COBB, and when we send you calibrations, our own custom calibrations, and you upload them on the Accessport, you're going to see them also down here in the list that you can select. So stage 0, so installation of Accessport over anything other than OEM or COBB software may result in ECU, TCU failures. So if you got any questions regarding any of this, then please don't hesitate to reach out to us. A COBB support team is also really awesome. So here again, it tells you to get a charger on there, which we have, and to begin the installation process. This takes the longest. Oh, the ECU is locked. Please continue to unlock the ECU. Okay. It's jailbreaking the ECU right now. As you can see, that there's no additional pieces that are needed to get this done. All right, so now that you're at this screen, that means your Accessport has been successfully installed. Look at that, Accessport and a Honda. Woot! Anyways, there's a few important gauge screens here. Well, let's go from the bottom. Uninstall. If you want to unmarry the Accessport completely from your car, then you go ahead and hit uninstall, and then the Accessport is completely unmarried from your car, and you can actually port this to another similar Civic that uses the same part number for the Accessport, resell it, what have you. Under tune, here's where you can change the ECU map, and if you go under here, there's a list of those maps that we saw initially when we installed. As we do tuning, you're going to see more maps here, and as of course we send them to you guys, you're going to see the maps here that you can flash. Outside of that, there's the clear codes, check codes, troubleshooting menu. There's a performance menu that you can kind of does a 0 to 60 time and so on, but really the really important stuff happens right here under the gauges menu. So the gauges menu is you decide how many gauges you want your Accessport to live view, and then you can basically adjust what each gauge is viewing from the available parameters. So we're doing AFR on the first gauge. Okay, fair enough. Let's go to the one next to it, and we go change monitor, and here we can do something like let's see, manifold pressure or something like that, like boost. There you go, map. So right now it's 14 psi, which is just atmospheric pressure, and this is also a representation of boost. So you can go through and adjust these parameters to what you like to live view. This can act as a shift light, these three lights. They also, when you're data logging, such as this, these lights scrolling up indicate data logging. So that's what I press the center button to start data logging. You press the center button to stop data logging, and to view your data logs, you need to hook this up with the USB port to a laptop. What we need to do next, we can set up some of these other gauges to show us immediate information that's of interest, and we're gonna start data logging this car in stock stage 0 form and move on from there. But that is just how easy and how convenient it is to get an Accessport on your Type R. Alright, so here we are, folks. COBB Accessport in hand, dialed this Type R. So it's got 100,000 kilometers, almost 60,000 miles, well worn in. It's been used on track and everywhere else. It is running a stock intake. It's running an aftermarket catback, but that is it in terms of modifications, and it's running pump 91 fuel. So we first baseline this car on stage 0, which is a stock tune. You can see this faint blue line, and then dialed it in for the max performance that it can safely do on the hardware and the fuel that are present, and this is this line. So these are Mustang dyno numbers, and just to give you an idea of the peak, we got 328 wheel horsepower versus 283 for the stock tune. That's a gain of 44 wheel, and torque went from 281 to 349. That's 68 foot-pounds of torque. You can see power was gained across the board everywhere. Now, a few more details that are interesting about this car. So first of all, the turbocharger spools quickly. It spools at about 2,700 RPM. You get peak torque in 4th gear, which is nice. It holds a fairly flat torque curve, and it has some nice top end. So those are all very positive things. The first limitation that you're going to run into, depending on your fuel quality and so on, is going to be your stock mass airflow. So your stock intake contains a pipe like this, and there's a mass airflow sensor in there, and the diameter of that pipe limits how much range that sensor can have. On the stock intake pipe, we are right at the limit with about 320, 330 wheel horsepower, at this airflow level. So that's one limitation you're going to run into. You're going to need a bigger intake, and you're going to need a tune, because this is mass airflow based. You cannot just run a bigger intake and have the fueling and the timing correct. You need a calibration for that. Thing number 2 is that, just like all cars, it's octane sensitive. So we're about to drop some ethanol in this car, as well as an intake, which I brought it up earlier. So we're going to be covering that very, very shortly. But that's the second limitation. So if we had more octane, we're going to see more power, and we're very shortly going to see that in this exact car. And then finally, I'm seeing some limitations of the OEM fuel system. So probably on E30 with the stock turbocharger, you're going to reach the limit of the direct injection fuel system, and we have some solutions in the works for that. So stay tuned. We have a ton of experience with augmenting DI with port injection, and we're going to be doing something for this car because it flows so well, and it has the capacity to run a lot more ethanol and a lot more boost safely with the fueling in place. So far, these are the results. Bone stock car, and it made some great gains. It was a pleasure to tune using the COBB Accessport, and we're going to be offering these calibrations for you guys, and we're going to actually push this car a little bit further. So more to come, but these are the preliminary results on the COBB Accessport. Now, let's talk about MAF housings. So the FK8 Type R is a mass airflow based car, which means that it has a mass airflow sensor that is inserted into the intake MAF housing. It samples the air entering through the intake, and it tells the ECU through a mass airflow calibration how much air in grams per second, so how much molar mass of air is entering the engine right at the intake. Now, there's some good things and some bad things about this. One of the good things is that it's a direct measurement of mass airflow, and you don't have the complex models that are in a bunch of the new vehicles that are speed density models for variable valve timing and so on. So this uses a relatively simple model to directly measure airflow going to the engine. The bad thing is that if you do have a leak, this is going to throw everything off. The other bad thing, as we're noticing, is that this mass airflow sensor, as calibrated, this Hitachi MAF, as calibrated in this car, tops out at about 300 grams per second. Now, that means that the voltage basically caps out on this MAF at about that point. And as I mentioned in the car video showing the results, the turbo can flow more air. However, if we reach the limit of the mass airflow sensor, not only do we get a check engine light, but we also can't tell how much more air is entering the engine. So now to address that, there's basically two ways to go about it. Both of them require that you recalibrate the software in the ECU, which we can of course do that for you. So one of them is to actually increase the diameter of this pipe. Increasing the diameter of this pipe as a percentage, cross-sectional percentage of what's entering the MAF, allows you to read a larger amount of air. This does require a new MAF calibration. The other way to do it is to get a mass airflow sensor that is calibrated to actually have a lower resolution so that it can read a higher amount of total air going through the same pipe. Now, the pipe that we have right here, and these are three intakes. This is a stock airbox, this is an Eventuri, and this is a PRI intake. So, and you can see that there's the MAF location for all three of them, and you can tell the size of the MAF simply by measuring it. So this is about 78.3 millimeters, and in inches you're looking about right about the 3-inch mark. Stock size still, also stock sized. So when we throw these on the car just to see what they do in terms of performance, we will be gaining some airflow performance because of the freer flowing intakes and filters. However, it doesn't solve our problem that we have right now, and that is that we are still maxing out this mass airflow sensor in the top end. In order to do that, we would just need to either run a different sensor or run a larger diameter pipe. Then we need to recalibrate your ECU to read all this properly. All right, so now we're back inside the Type R. This is our E30 tune on the car. I'm going to show you the gains from that as well. First of all, we're going to be looking at adding some ethanol. So adding some ethanol increases octane, increases our ability to run more timing, run more boost. This is a stock car, so we're limited by the intake, size of the intake. We can't really run any more boost, and these are our results. Now, I want to put this in perspective compared to pump gas. So here you are. The dark line is E30, E25 really, and then the faint line is pump gas. You can see that gains are had across the board, and I also like to show you in terms of time how much quicker a fourth gear takes with E30 versus pump. 9.135 seconds versus 9.7. Yeah, it's flashing there. So 9.7. Now, since we're doing time comparisons, I'll bring you back to what a stock car does, and you can now really see what tuning does. So we're at 9.1 second for a fourth gear sweep, and on a stock car we're like 11.5 seconds. That's how much faster you are when you are tuned, specifically on ethanol. So bring it back to engine speed, and you can see that we are at, on Mustang dyno numbers, 346 wheel horsepower on E30 and 366 foot-pounds of torque, and right here is the pump gas, which is at 283 and 281 respectively. So lots of gains to be had from going and tuning this car on high octane fuel, and there's of course gains to be had from going from pump gas tuned to going to E30. We're only gaining about 20 horsepower. Down low, we're starting to hit the limitations of the HPFP. Up top, we're close to the limitations of the injectors, but not just yet. So there's a little bit of headroom there, but we're starting to see a touch of knock. So going from pump to E25, we're seeing about a 20 wheel horsepower increase. Now let's talk about the intakes. The intakes. Everyone wants to see what that is about. So if we're going to pick, first let's talk about the PRL intake. I'm going to compare it to what we had on the stock intake. what do you notice in this graph? First of all, the intake allows for a faster spool. That's nice. That's the higher flow from the intake. That is great to see. Faster spool, better response. You're going to feel that in your foot. You're also going to hear that with your ears. In terms of power from the PRL intake, we're not really gaining a heck of a lot of power, which means that the stock intake in terms of this particular setup, this particular turbocharger, it flows pretty well. It flows pretty well up top. We're not losing, we're not gaining. There's a little bit of a disparity right there, but there you go. So some more sound, a little bit better response. Intake is for you, and maybe a few horsepower gain here, a few horsepower lost here. And in terms of just acceleration time between these, you can see that with the PRL intake, you do gain a little bit of acceleration time right there. You know, we're talking about 8.95 to like 9.144. So yes, there is a little bit in terms of acceleration time, but not a lot. Now we had the Eventuri intake on here as well, so let's drop that guy in. So now on the Eventuri intake is the faint line, so we still have the dark line as the PRL intake. You can see that they spool about the same, with the PRL maybe spooling a little bit more. They accelerated very similarly, so we're still in terms of time there. So they're pretty much they're neck and neck, intake to intake, between the two intakes. And let's go back to engine speed. The Eventuri has a little bit of torque gain here, and the PRL has a little bit better top end. Very similar performance between the two, so it comes down to personal taste and personal preference. So hopefully this sheds some light. This shed some light on our foray into tuning this car using the COBB Accessport. This is going to be on our website. This is going to be you know, our support towards the FK8 is going to be primarily using this tool. We're also getting familiar with other tools, and most importantly, we are coming up to speed very quickly on what this car needs in order to make even more power, in order to extract the most performance. By far, you're going to get the most performance by tuning your car. So tuning should be a first thing. This is no different than all the other platforms that we tune. The gains are amazing on a turbocharged car. You throw some higher octane on there, it's great, but even just on pump gas, there's tons of gains to be made on the car, and it's nice, it's reliable, it's stout, feels great, drives great. So that's where we're at right now, and hopefully you guys found this interesting. Subscribe and keep on watching. Ask us any questions if you got them. Very open to questions, and hit us up for all of your tuning needs and parts needs and so on. We'll be happy to help, and we'll be happy to most importantly help you get the most out of your Type R, and help you understand the things that work and the things that don't. So until next time, cheers.